osteopathic medicine in Las Cruces. I assumed this role at the end of August, just a little over a month ago. Prior to that, I served at Texas A&M University's College of Medicine as a regional dean there. By history, I was born and raised in Texas, attended Texas A&M for my undergraduate degree, went to medical school in Fort Worth at Texas College of Osteopathic Medicine, and then did an internal medicine residency at Scott and White Memorial Hospital in Temple, Texas. After that, I practiced internal medicine in rural Texas, primarily the town of LaGrange, a small town of about 4,500 people. I practiced there for just about 18 years before then moving to College Station, where I continued internal medicine practice and then also began my medical education effort, teaching medical students through A&M's College of Medicine. So that is just a little bit about me. So I would like to just provide a little bit of background on the system that we utilize for training physicians, beginning with medical school and on through internship and residency, which constitutes the GME portion of this. But so as most of you probably know, medical school consists of 4 years of both classroom and clinical training. And at the end of that 4 years, a student is granted a DO, a Doctor of Osteopathic Medicine, or an MD, a medical doctor degree, depending on whether they've attended an osteopathic or an allopathic medical school. And then that degree entitles them to go on to a residency position where they gain further training in their specialty of choice, be it family medicine, internal medicine, pediatrics, OB-GYN, surgery, psychiatry, and so forth. And those residencies range from 3 to 7 years in length. And at the conclusion of that time, a graduate is then able to be licensed and potentially board certified in their specialty of choice and go on and practice without need for additional supervision by training physicians. As it pertains to New Mexico, we currently have 7 sponsoring institutions that run oversee 27 specialty residency programs that utilize a total of about almost 600 resident physicians. New Mexico, our GME presence makes up about half of 1% of the training positions nationally, and so we don't necessarily have a surplus of training positions available in the state. This becomes important when we look at how physician graduates of these programs tend to choose their area of practice. In New Mexico, residents that graduate from programs, about 50% will stay in state to practice, and the other half move out of state to practice. Just by comparison, our neighbor to the east, Texas, has about 2/3 of their residents remain in state, and about 1/3 leave the state to practice. Where this gets to be a very fragile system is there has been an initiative over the last 8 to 10 years to expand the number of medical schools to meet the current and potentially worsening physician shortage. And so this growth of medical school numbers has unfortunately outpaced the number of graduate medical education residency slots available. And when those medical school graduates finish school and are seeking a residency spot, if they don't have sufficient spots in their state, they tend to leave the state. And what that ends up leading to is our state is spending time and resources educating other states' future physicians. And so our goal is to expand graduate medical education, to add to the number of training program slots available to our medical school graduates, to increase the likelihood that those graduates will remain in New Mexico and practice and provide care for the citizens of New Mexico. So what other states have done, again, using Texas as an example, they have created ways of trying to lessen the burden of this imbalance. One, they limit the number of students an out-of-state medical school can place in their state to train. They also prevent out-of-state schools from compensating their physician preceptors. If I use the term preceptor, that is the term we use in medical education for a teaching physician. And those teaching physicians train both residents and medical students. And so what we are looking to try to help with is to improve the stability of this fragile system so that additional hospitals can participate in GME programs, house additional residents, and again, retain more of our resident graduates for the state of New Mexico. So the good news in all of this is that we at Burrell are part of a working group that includes the State Hospital Association, the Primary Care Association, and the Medical Society, partnering with HSD and working to develop a proactive and sustainable process to manage GME and accommodate GME expansion in a responsible way. And so in doing this, we are working to provide input for House Bill 480, sponsored by Representative Doreen Gallegos. And I would just like to take this opportunity to thank Representative Gallegos for her initiative and her effort to support this. And this legislation would create a board of advisors housed in HSD to bring all the stakeholders together to work through and meet the challenges and opportunities related to GME expansion. And so again, this group is working on solutions that will generate standards for medical schools as they interact with and feed our GME programs. And so with that, I will pause and open things up for any questions or clarification as needed. Thank you.
We'll hold questions until everybody's done with their presentation. Is there anything next?
So I think that's Madam Chair, that's it for our presenters. Just one point of clarification, HB 480 was a piece of legislation Representative Gallegos passed in 2019. And what Dr. Peratt is speaking to is a draft legislation that we're working on this session that will set standards for GME programs. So the board in HSD already exists and is already functioning. And so we're just looking to help the state set some standards to protect the state from proprietary medical schools. So I think we could stand for questions at this point, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Do we have any questions from members in the chamber? Any from Senator Rodriguez?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I'm on in the screen because this screen lost its chat button and I can't, suddenly it's just disappeared. So I wasn't sure if you could see my hand or not. Maybe Sarah can help us or somebody on the web host can help us to find this chat button. But anyway, let me just say good afternoon to to Pilar and to Dr. Peratt and Justin McHorse and others for your presentation. And I wanted first to say that I had the good fortune of visiting your college a few years ago. And I was so impressed. I can't wait to get back. It was a fast meeting. We got a tour, and I still have the impression of the nice models that you had in the, I don't know what office or room that was. It was a big room where you had models with like the body, the anatomy, and the skeleton of a person, and so many other things that we got to see that were so real. Literally, we could touch them and feel like it was exactly what we are. Anyway, it was a good feeling. It was a feeling of warmth and a place where you want to go back to. And I know it has to do with the vision and the mission that you have as a college of osteopathic. But let me just make sure I understand here, Dr. Peratt. The Board of Advisors, Pilar mentioned earlier, is already in place. I thought you had mentioned earlier that there's legislation to put this board in place, but now I'm confused. So can you just explain it for me a little bit? And then I know that you're looking to expand it to generate more standards, but maybe you'll explain just briefly a little more, Dr. Peratt. Correct. Thank you.
Yes, no problem. Thank you, Senator Rodriguez, and I apologize for the confusion. So what we are working on with this legislation, along with the Hospital Association, the Medical Society, and Primary Care Physician Association, is we are looking to, as Pilar mentioned, to develop a plan that is a proactive approach, so that medical schools from outside New Mexico, if they wish to participate or to train their students in New Mexico, that they would basically need to support, in addition to their students' training, they would need to support the growth of graduate medical education, so that we are not just utilizing teaching resources for another state's schools' students, because the likelihood of those students ending up in the state is very low if you look at the typical data. So again, I apologize for the confusion. This advisory board would be in addition or as part of the existing board to oversee that process and reduce the likelihood of these of predatory schools coming into the state without contributing to our resources.
I see. Is it kind of, Madam Chairman, was somebody else going to speak before I ask something else? I thought I heard something in the background. No? Okay. Let me just ask this question, Dr. Peratt. Is this kind of like prioritizing services for in-state students? It seems like, all in a nutshell, that's what I hear. It all boils down to that. You prioritize in-state, and if anyone from out of state comes, they have to commit to your mission, basically, and so on. Tell me, am I correct?
Yes, ma'am. I would agree that this does create a priority for our in-state students, in so much as we don't, as we would like to limit the ability of another school coming in and competing for those same resources. That basically this would require that if an out-of-state school wants to train its students in New Mexico, they also need to contribute to creating the resources to do so. And so that is, I think you have a clear picture. Yes, ma'am.
I see. Okay. Is there a thought at all, Madam Chairman and Dr. I want to make sure I pronounce your name correctly, Dr. Peratt? Peratt, tell me your pronunciation. Okay, thank you. Anyway, yes. Is there a consideration as to something, for example, maybe not a compact, because that would be you're reversing back services to other states and then back to here. But that's where you enter into the clear language, hopefully, about what each state is going to be doing in your services. And so it seems to me that this is different than something like that.
Yes, ma'am, and it is early. We are getting. We're still kind of working and drafting the language, but I think the underlying concept is such that what we would do is limit the or require. Let's just use a different term. We would require or we would ask that an out-of-state school that wishes to train students in the state also help create the additional GME slots for those students to then have the opportunity to remain in New Mexico or residency training that would be required between graduating from medical school and actually being able to practice. So it's not necessarily anti-competition. It's just that if you want to be here, you need to create a mechanism for your students to stay here beyond their medical school training.
I see. So it seems like we're merely requiring them to adhere to our priorities. And our priorities are to ensure that our medical students do everything we can anyway to ensure that our medical students remain in New Mexico. We have a shortage that's huge here. And so you want them to be in line with what the requirements are here in New Mexico, and for them to commit, if there's any out-of-state students, to come here to commit to what is required. But Dr. Peratt, aren't they already required? Just curious here, because if they come into the state, there's already laws in the state. Wouldn't they already be required to adhere to that? Like, for example, to remain, if they're going to get loans, or they're going to be in New Mexico and in medical school here, for example, the idea is for them to remain, especially to helping rural areas and so on. Can you respond to that?
Yes, ma'am, and I appreciate the question and the opportunity to clarify. So there are pipeline programs and there are financial aid programs that do require service, time service in return for the loan or as a forgiveness of the financial aid. But what this would create is a little bit different because, for instance, if an out-of-state school sent its student to New Mexico for training, there's not currently a mechanism to increase the likelihood that student remains. That they are beholden, they may be beholden to their financial aid or scholarships or their school's state of occupancy and organization, but not necessarily anything committing them to a presence in New Mexico beyond their medical school training.
I see. A good explanation. So, Madam Chairman, yes, and Dr. Peratt, the idea then is really to do everything we can to keep those students here in New Mexico to assist, because we have such a big shortage. And by virtue of the fact that you're producing and providing the education with your Burrell College here, you really are trying to do what you can to keep these students here. And are those going to be caveats or provisions within this law, within this new bill that will be presented?
So yes, ma'am, as we are drafting, what we are looking at is that a school that seeks a presence for accreditation in New Mexico would, and we're working out ratios, but for X number of students, they would be required to create at least one residency slot for, say, every 10 or 15 students in their class. And if they're looking at a class of, say, 150, then that may be 10 additional residency slots for the students that they wish to place.
I see. Okay. Thank you very much. I was going to ask if, what it is that we can do from a legislative perspective to assist you in getting this this done, because we want to make sure that we can keep as many graduates that graduate here in New Mexico, that we can keep them here. So we appreciate your proactive plan here, but and it seems that you already have something going with respect to legislation to get this matter corrected, and hopefully it will work. So that's all I have, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Dr. Peratt, and your presenters. Appreciate your work. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Dr. Peratt. Any other questions from anybody in the chamber? Anybody online? Okay. I have a couple of questions. Thank you. So I was looking at HB 40 and looking through it, and I see that there was something about the board having the Secretary of Human Services, and I'm assuming that's federal? I don't know if anybody on the that presented could answer about HB 480.
I apologize, Madam Chair. I do not have that legislation available at this time, and so I'm happy to get that information and provide that clarification as soon as I can.
Okay, and well, it's really going towards my question is, where with the tribes and the nations and the pueblos is the where's their voice in this with HB 40? I mean, is there an actual member that is on that board that is either from IHS or is somehow related with the tribal governments, nations, and pueblos in New Mexico?
So, Madam Chair, thank you. I will have to get the full roster of our participants and provide that to you. I don't have the full roster available at this time.
Okay, thank you. And I think that probably would have helped us to understand exactly and when, and with a timeline of when this board would be reporting or when this review would be finished with their plan to be presented, so we can have a look at it too prior to it really being put out there, so we're not caught up with a lot of other things. In your presumption and what's going on with COVID, how bad do you think we are going to see the decline in this profession? Because right now I'm already seeing that a lot of the elder providers, the doctors, the nurses are retiring, kind of getting out of there, or else they got sick. Do you see real bad, as far as we know, we were already in need, but we don't have as many hospitals too to have these residency spots, and the initiatives and the incentives to keep them here don't seem to be enough in some sense. Do you still predict a wide decline?
So thank you, Madam Chair. It's an excellent point. Fortunately, the early evidence, and we are, as medical schools interview applicants, it's that time of year where that process is just beginning. But the early data that's put out by both allopathic and osteopathic bodies that monitor applications suggest that our medical school applications are actually up during this cycle. And so it's very encouraging that students or prospective students still feel called to the healing profession and are seeking, training in medical schools. So we understand the pandemic is something that no one alive has really ever seen. or dealt with from a medical education standpoint, but we find it encouraging that applications are actually trending upward at this time.
Madam Chair, if I may, I'd like to offer some points of clarification.
Yes, please do.
So HB 480 is not the number of the bill that we are running this session. HB 480 was passed in 2019, I think. The piece of legislation that we're working on doesn't have a number yet. We're still pulling the stakeholders together. It will not create a new board. It will only create some standards within the licensure process for schools, either out of state or new medical schools in New Mexico. Like if a medical school comes to New Mexico from outside of New Mexico and wants to put up shop. This will ensure that these new medical schools follow the same standards of GME participation that UNM and Boral College of Osteopathic Medicine do. And so it's really designed to kind of have a safety net to not only do the things that Dr. Peratt has alluded to by way of keeping medical students inside the state of New Mexico, but it also is a strong protector against predatorial schools. So there's many schools popping up that are predatorial. Their students don't get the best education. They don't participate in a proactive way in a GME building. And so it causes this very, I think, a dangerous standard of GME programming. And so the intent of the legislation we're proposing and that we're working on with other stakeholders is to kind of set some guidelines in the licensure process that ensure that these schools participate at a level that is good for the state of New Mexico and not something that hinders the state of New Mexico. And so that's just point of clarification, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, when I look at the Bill 480, it says there's, that it's a 9-member board and, members from the department, higher education department, hospitals, primary care consortiums, medical organizations, medical professional societies and associations. But when we talk about, in my corner of New Mexico, is how are the tribes, pueblos, and nations having their voice heard with the issue, with this particular issue of, trying to grow more doctors in New Mexico, especially Native American doctors, when we do have problems back with the schools, or do we have some kind of conversation going on with PED when they're trying to do these career technical programs? And I understand they, like in Gallup with the UNM branch, that they do have shadows in GIMC and in some of but we also have Shiprock. We also have some of those smaller schools out there on the reservation where the students are deeper in the community, that they're actually, living on the reservation, living that life, and highly likely to return there and stay in New Mexico. It is, our doctors and our families are not here in New Mexico. They're all the way somewhere else in the States. That those issues to keep them here need to be addressed too. And within this, I see some representation, but not direct representation of the Pueblos, tribes, and nations. That's my view. I don't know if you want to answer that or comment on it.
No, Madam Chair, point well taken. I know that many of the associations that are participating on that board do have doctors and other participants in the medical care field in tribal countries. So I know that there is conversations happening. I don't know if there's a formal representation that is singularly Native American, but I do know that these associations do work with all the hospitals throughout New Mexico and many of the doctors throughout New Mexico. So I think there's a touch there where the tribal concerns can be met, but it is something that I will definitely put on our radar. And I greatly appreciate your concerns, and it is something that we will be considerate of moving forward with our proposed legislation for 2021.
Thank you, and I would appreciate that. And last call for any questions or comments to the board. But I appreciate you guys' your work and what you're doing and what we're trying to do and move progress forward for our great state of New Mexico. Thank you. I think we're good now. You guys have a great day, and thank you for presenting to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, I think we're going to see if our next presenter's here to start early on the veterans issues in Tohatchi. Hold on.
Yes, don't worry about it.
We can hear you. Don't forget to mute. Sorry. So we have minutes from August 4th, 2020 meeting and the September 1st, 2020 meeting as far as business needing to be addressed by the committee. I don't know if I have a motion to approve the minutes. So we have Representative Lewis with the motion to approve the minutes and
Senator Rodriguez, second.
Seconded by Senator Rodriguez. So the minutes for August 4th and or do we have?
There's no voice, Madam Chairman.
Okay, so we're doing approval for both August 4th and September 1st if there are not any objections. So ordered. So we have approval of the minutes for the Indian Affairs Committee meeting. And we are still waiting to see if we can get our next presenter here a little bit early. So Okay, we'll take a 15-minute break. Make sure you mute your microphones while you're on break. Thank you. Or we'll reconvene in at 2:05.
There you go.
Don't tell,
There you go.
don't tell Dreader those guys that did that.
Thank you, everybody. Here you go. Okay, what have we got? 2 minutes? 2 minutes?
Have to slide no matter what.
Yeah. 2 minutes. Okay, so it's live now.
Can I flee back to my cave?
Yeah. I think it's more of a, cave is downstairs. You're muted on my next Can you guys hear me? Yep. Thank you.
I have to get too
Good
close to
day.
it. I have to.
We're good. Okay, those out there and in the chamber, we're back in business here. We got Lars Manuelito, Commander-elect with the Natachi Veterans Organization, who's here in person in the House Chamber. So go ahead. Good to have you here.
Do I use that? Oh, okay. So I can just turn around and talk to everybody, talk to those guys? Oh, okay, okay. Okay, is that better? Better, okay. I'm short, so. All right then, let's get the show on the road. Let's see here. In the first slide, before anything, there's 2 quotes. One is with Chief Manuelito, War Chief Manuelito, and the other is from General George S. Patton. George S. Patton quoted, "The soldier is the army. No army is better than its soldiers. The soldier is also a citizen. In fact, the highest obligation and privilege of citizenship is that of bearing arms for one's country." General George S. Patton, U.S. Army. And the second one is, "My people, wake up. My head is bursting with ideas. Join me. I need your help to make these ideas come true." War Chief Manuelito. This is the first time an audience is hearing this direct quote from Chief Manuelito. I'm one of the direct descendants from him through his youngest wife and his youngest son. This teaching was orally passed down for me, generationally to me, and I felt that it was appropriate to share with you today. These are quotes that are from 2 military-minded individuals that led their prospective people to victories on and off the battlefield. One, a war veteran of the U.S. Army, and the other, a war chief of the Dene Navajo people. General Patton led in World War II and the invasion of Normandy. War Chief Manuelito helped keep his people secure, safe, while negotiating for their freedom and return to our 4 sacred mountains. What they have in common is the belief that it is the power of their people to make a difference. General S. Patton, his soldiers, War Chief Manuelito, his Dene people. Yat A. Buenos tardes, and good afternoon. New Mexico Indian Affairs, Madam Co-Chair, Shannon Pinto, Co-Chair Georgine Lewis, this is her, and committee members. Before I begin on the behalf of all Navajo veterans, New Mexico veterans, Navajo Nation Veterans Administration, and Tohatchi Veterans Organization, I want to thank you for this opportunity to come before you and present our veteran concerns, challenges, and aspirations. We and I appreciate it very much. Outline of this presentation is as follows: introduction of self, brief introduction, description of TVO, Tohatchi Veterans Organization, Fort Defiance and Eastern Agency Veterans Organizations, and the Navajo Nation Veterans Administration, how they all play a role in assisting New Mexico Dene Navajo veterans. Overview of the PowerPoint of the challenges Tohatchi Veteran Organization faces. Okay. How do we go next? Next one. Okay. The first challenge that we face is housing. I'm going to read off of my notes, but up here is a basic overview of what you see, what we face. And everything that Diné, Navajo, New Mexico veterans face is what Tohatchi Veterans Organization faces at a local level. So based on the Veterans Trust Fund, there is an amount distributed to the veterans for housing. This is based on a trust fund and is fluctuating market in which it sits. Therefore, 1 year it can be lucrative, another year is a loss. A known truth not mentioned much is that the Navajo Nation is mostly in the state of Arizona. Therefore, funding for housing is naturally deemed more toward their agencies. New Mexico, Fort Defiance Agency and Eastern Agency, NNVA, Navajo Nation Veterans Administration, and prospective representatives, examples is council delegates, local veteran organizations such as Tohatchi Veterans Organizations, are left to consistently advocate on our own for the same funding. And there it says, majority of the Navajo Nation is located in Arizona, and there's some of the challenges that we face on the New Mexico side. So the aspirations for New Mexico veteran housing is that some ideas that we're trying to get started, if we could, is to employ contractors based on Navajo preference, create opportunities for veterans to learn job skills and vocational skills in the construction industry for local veterans. And when I say local veterans, of course, Tohatchi local veterans is my first concern. And then also for their family members. And another new thing is creating a sweat equity for the veteran, that he or she contributed to the construction of their housing. And sweat equity is a party's contribution to a project in the form of labor. That's one challenge. Second challenge is challenges for transportation for New Mexico veterans. Because a lot of our veterans, especially our more World War II Vietnam veterans, are elderly and they don't have the family support to take them to their appointments or for their claims. So in which case, in an example, I was working with a veteran who was affected by Agent Orange, and he was a Coyote Canyon veteran. And it took him 30 years to look for housing, and he hasn't got it yet. Even though I was able to get the CHR to start visiting him for medical care, there was such a tie-up in the regular Navajo Housing Administration that there was no way to get him housing. And I still try and keep track of him as it goes along, but there's just no movement because of lack of funding in the Navajo Nation Housing Authority. So again, this is a known truth. So the sweat equity is something that we can try and instill in the New Mexico veterans so that we can have them instill a sense of contribution to their home so that they will, take care of it and upkeep it more than something that's just given to them. And that's a pretty new concept that we're still trying to convey to the local organizations. And so the next one, the aspirations for transportation for New Mexico Navajo veterans, is to create another transportation program that, if funded by the state, will acquire more vehicles. There's 2 vehicles that were given to the New Mexico side, to the Navajo veterans. One was sent to Chinle and one was to Crown Point. But as of now, they have high mileage and they're very worn down. So, if vehicles could be an acquisition, we could employ more drivers. We could actually go out to the rural areas and pick up the individuals that need to go to medical appointments, or also those who are looking for employment. Now, it's not a shuttle to take them to and from work, but to help them find employment and help them find resources to be able to get the transportation needed to continue employment. And especially if the appointments are where the closest VA hospital is Albuquerque. That's a huge barrier, because The local IHS clinics, a lot of them will not take veterans because they don't have a memorandum of agreement set up with the federal government, IHS, to be able to take the veterans. So the only certain MOAs are set in Arizona, but New Mexico, I believe the only one is Crown Point. I know Tohatchee, we were trying to work on getting an MOA set up, but Rosalind So, the administrator for IHS, that was one of the barriers that we were talking about last year, is trying to get these set up to get the IHSs to be able to take them. It's up to the individual. Like, for instance, when I went to get a TB test the other day at Tohatchee Clinic, because I was being seen more at Gallup, they were saying go to Gallup. And I didn't even mention being a veteran because I've been turned away at Gallup JMC as a veteran before. So that creates a lot of red tape. So the Navajo Nation Veterans Administration are still looking into trying to create more communication with the federal IHS to get all the IHS online to be able to take veterans so that we could be counted, because that's one of the reasons why building a VA hospital on the Navajo reservation is they're looking for the numbers. They're looking for veterans who are actually in need, and until they see the numbers, we have to go through either, if we're allowed, JIMC, and if not, VA administration here in Albuquerque. Now, a lot of confusion comes when we encompass Arizona, Navajo veterans, and New Mexico, but right now, what I'm really focusing on is New Mexico, and again, to Tohatchee Veterans Organization, and what they face when they try and go get seen for a cold, all the way up to surgery, to whatever their illness is. So that's a big hurdle. And there's a lot of communication, there's a lot of conversations still to be had with that. But that's kind of where we're at now. But if we could get at least the transportation to help take them to their appointments and to their employment, then that would be a little bit a step toward the positive. So, and in Tohatchee, the discussion is brought up sometimes, but there's no answers, there's no results. So it's just forgotten, and the veterans kind of left to figure it out on their own. So due to the pandemic, a new way of being seen or making appointments, I don't know if you're noticing, is that they do teleconference or video conference. This, however, requires consistent internet connection, and there is a mobile command located in Gallup which goes out to local chapters, which can go to local chapters. That in itself is another agreement that needs to be made with them. They're located with the New Mexico veterans. But in the meeting that we had before last year, they were willing to be able to talk about having those mobile command centers come out to the chapters. And the veterans can go there and do their video conference, their medical conference, or their claims and benefits, rather than travel all the way to Albuquerque, and thus lessening exposure to COVID-19. Because a lot of our veterans are older veterans trying to get their claims through, and they're more susceptible to these illnesses because of their, peripheral illnesses or illnesses that were acquired during military service. So that's a new idea that has come up now and again lately, the past year, and just getting those lines of communication open. But again, finding the funding to do this is always a obstacle. Navajo Nation, again, has more representation on the Arizona side, so a lot of it tends to go that way, and we have to fight for what we need to get on New Mexico side. And if you go all the way to where we end, we're pretty substantial in our area as well. So that's our aspiration for transportation. And the Carl T. Hayden program. It's up there as a description of it. This right here entails a lot of the counseling, that veterans are requiring more and more, that barely PTSD is barely being researched, and concrete evidence is finally coming up on the impact that PTSD is having and has had. I know my great-grandfather, Jack Manuelito Jr. he was third ID, and he went to World War II. He came back, and how my great-grandmother says he was crazy, because he seen so much combat that he didn't know how to handle it, so he turned to alcohol and succumbed to alcoholism. And so PTSD is now being said to have the silent killer, if you will, that we're trying to start finding funding to be able to have counselors be able to help in more ways than they can. I just spoke with a major from the National Guard when on the way up, and he gave me his story on how he tried to find some kind of counseling and had to really search in Farmington to finally find one. But it shouldn't take that much to be able to have and this is a veteran that's, he's able to look. What about the elder that's not able to look? We have to look for them. So then the Carl-T. Hayden program is not for the Western medicine type of program. It's for traditional healing. It's for the cultural side. It's to provide funding for practitioners to come in and give their services to the veterans who prefer to have that instead of Western medicine and counseling. I've heard time and time again where, at the local organization meetings that that counselors don't understand, and a lot of them are second, they speak English and then Navajo, so they're not understood as well as they wish they could be. So to be able to have this program or similar reinstated would help be able to start funding the practitioners again, because the program was depleted and it wasn't replenished at the federal level. And so being able to get it reimbursed and have the veterans start seeing diagnosticians and traditional ceremonies again for their treatment would help bring up the morale and bring up the esprit de corps of the veterans, to say that we're at least trying to address their concerns at their cultural and traditional levels, as opposed to just giving them one avenue and that's it. And this is for PTSD, for physical ailments, overall mental health, and connection with cultural and traditions, to keep them connected with their culture and their traditions. And it's not only, hopefully, not just for the veteran, but hopefully it can go as far as the family members, because we now know when the veteran goes to war, he comes back, and the family's the one that are the first ones to see the effects of combat. And I know this personally for a fact, because I did one tour in OIF 0910, and the first things my children told me was, I came back a different person. I couldn't see it and I couldn't understand it, but they could see it. And they were just barely starting conferences to educate the families and the effects of combat, but it was still very new and very elementary. So my children had to be able to be proactive in trying to educate themselves on how to deal with a war veteran that came back, a different person. So, and I myself. So, but that's the Carl-T. Hayden program. It's no longer active, but we wanted to see it with funding, the state funding, we could do this to be able to help Navajo veterans start seeing practitioners again, employing practitioners. And I spoke with the director of the Navajo Nation Administration, and he had mentioned that even the practitioners are very particular about who they service. You know, if they're clan related or if they're in a certain region, they won't go to that region. So it's having to employ different practitioners for different areas, yet on the Mexico side and then as a whole, you know, in the Navajo Nation. But if that could happen, I think that would really, then the veterans would really benefit from it. And so that's another challenge that we face, and that's the aspirations if funding was provided that we could help get that started again. And you see the second one is the aspirations to reinstate the program for PTSD, for physical ailments, overall mental health. And the overall mental health part is, again, counselors, even on the Western Medicine side, to be able to have them go see counselors and, you know, and practitioners in our traditional way. So the impact on Tohatchi Veterans Organization is the majority of our veterans are older war veterans with family or spouse taking care of them. There are many ailments, they're military related or peripheral, makes them more susceptible to COVID-19. With implementation of these programs would help alleviate unnecessary exposure to COVID-19 for our veterans. Case in point, the veterans were, because of the way the trust fund works on the Navajo Nation side, were urged to spend their funds way before. And so they did, but when it came to an emergency like this, there was no funds available from Navajo Nation so that we could buy our veterans masks, sanitation, sanitizers, what we could have provided for our veterans that the chapter couldn't provide, you know, so at least they're taken care of because they're older and they're more susceptible to COVID-19. You know, that would have been great to have for them because a lot of times they run out of funding. And right now, Tohatchi is at a zero balance in budget. So we couldn't do anything if we wanted to. And they're tied up in their budget cycle, getting it approved on the Navajo Nation side. So we just wait till they approve it and we see how much we get. And we have to make do with what we get. So it is one of my goals as commander-elect to help Tohatchi veterans and New Mexico Indian veterans to reach a new level of care and maintain the new normal that COVID-19 precautions have brought and asked us to maintain. So that's it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for your presentation. Do we have any questions from members in the chamber? Representative Alcon.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for your presentation. I'm just curious about the mobile unit. Did you say there is a unit in Gallup that can go out to the, am I still on? I'm doing okay. That can go out of Gallup and into the chapter houses for care of the patients?
Yes, there is, sir. There is a mobile command that's out there, and we had a meeting with the federal VA, and there was a lot of entities there, and they were one of them. And the conversation was started orally, but it was going to take like more funding and more agreements to be able to bring them out. But it is a possibility to bring them out to chapters.
Could you, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, and could you, how is this mobile unit funded? That's what I'm curious about. Let me just explain about, I don't know, 10 years ago, 9 years ago, I had this crazy dream of having a mobile unit that would be able to go out throughout the whole reservation, and instead of people driving from all the way from Crown Point to Gallup or everywhere, they could have this mobile unit and they could do telehealth. And even in the mobile unit, they could have somebody that could do the blood samples and everything, the lab work. But when it came to getting funding for it, I ended up at a zero, of course. But the biggest problem, of course, was at that time is we didn't have any internet available. And that was where we ended up zeroing out. And there was federal money available for something like this. And I tried working at that time with, I don't remember who the VA secretary was, the veteran secretary was. But again, like I say, I ended up with a big zero. But now I'm wondering if there is a mobile unit out there, I think it would behoove the VA to go out, because if a veteran is disabled at 60% or more, that veteran can get paid mileage for getting down to the primary care doctor or for whatever medical care that they need. So it's something that we really need to look into.
Absolutely, I agree, Senator. From the last time I heard, when I was talking with them, the New Mexico veterans, they were under the New Mexico veterans there in Gallup. And amongst all of the other barriers that were mentioned, that one kind of got put to the wayside. And when I was employed as a legislative assistant with a delegate, so my hands were kind of tied in how far I could take the negotiations, because I had, certain restrictions that I couldn't work past. But now, now that I am not with the delegate anymore, I can come out and actually say that that's something that I would like to pursue. And if the conversation can be opened more to them to be able to get the command out, to the mobile command out, I definitely would be able to look into that for you, sir.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I got one question. Is the Navajo Nation recognizing veterans organizations as organizations?
Thank you, Representative, for your question. I just spoke with several people about this just yesterday. And because the organizations at a local level are still considered subcommittees, just like the Club C or community land use committees or the farm boards, they're still considered subcommittees under the chapter. So they can be recognized by resolution by the chapters. However, if they want to go further for as far as looking for their own funding, they have to have the support of the chapter and then the support of the agency. So that's something that I think they've been trying to get recognized at the Navajo Nation administration level, but it takes a lot of advocating on the Navajo Nation side to be able to be recognized as an actual organization. But if we were, that would be great, because it would give us more leeway and more power to be able to advocate for ourselves. So, yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Because the reason I'm asking is because I help the Rural Veteran Center quite a bit. And the Navajo Nation quit recognizing them as an organization. They said they no longer existed, so they had to go through the chapter houses.
Yes, absolutely. If they know then that they're a subcommittee, they can say that, unfortunately. However, we still can, as an organization, our resolutions from organization up to chapter and to the Fort Defiance agency, for example, can be recognized at the agency level. Once it's at the agency level and they meet on it and they present it, then it can be recognized by the Navajo Nation as a legal document, as opposed to just a recommendation from the organization. So that's the way we've been doing it, is getting it up to the agency level to be able to get anything. But by that time, again, there's 24 chapters, I believe, in the Fort Defiance agency. They all get mixed up in the whole, all the organizations trying to pass resolutions and get their funds or get something recognized. So that's a question that was brought up just yesterday, and I was thinking about bringing it back up again. That now that you brought it up, sir, if you're okay, I could say, well, this is a question brought up at the committee level here, And that puts a little bit more power behind it, saying, well, perhaps maybe we need to look at recognizing it as an organization as opposed to just a subcommittee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Because I've been helping the rule for the last 4 years. And at first they were recognized, and now they're no longer recognized as an organization. One more question I have, Madam Chair. What kind of outreach do you have for your veterans?
At this point, sir, we hardly have any outreach because we don't have the manpower, and then we don't have the funding to be able to do it, because everything right now, again, goes through Navajo Nation. And if we are deemed a certain amount of budget, say for Tohatchi, and we're told to spend our budget right away before October, by August, they say we should have our budget spent. And August, September, October leaves us with, like right now, no funds to do anything. So if we had outreach, we wouldn't be able to do it because we can't pay our workers and or the funding to provide the material, the travel, going out to rural areas. And that was one of the things that the director was mentioning, and also a couple of other grassroots veterans that, I asked a question to, that if we could do outreach, that would be great. Going out to the rural areas. And there was a program that did that back in the day when I was told. There was a program that did go out to rural veterans and try and start counting them. But that stopped because of no funding. So.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I just want to let you know that, I'm the co-chair of the Veterans Committee for here. And if you would offline, if you want to sit down and talk to me, I would love to do that.
Okay. Oh, yes, definitely. I appreciate that, sir. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Garcia. Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And aro hehat shadeja hehat do yat a. I wanted to ask you if you work with the Gallup VA Satellite Clinic. And the reason why I wanted to ask you that is I have 2 veterans in my home, 86 years old uncle and 89. And we utilize the Gallup Satellite Clinic, and they refer us to both RMCHC8, Rehoboth McKinley, and they also refer us to Gallup GIMC. And they receive, really good health care. And also, when I was on an advisory board for Gallup GIMC, we did finalize and work on MOU agreements. So I do know that IHS and the Veterans Affairs are working together to improve health care for veterans through the Indian Health Service, which means Gallup, GIMC, Crown Point, should include Tohatchi, Fort Defiance, and those clinics. And then also GIMC has a diabetes mobile unit, a mammogram mobile unit, and a mobile unit they call Wellness on Wheels. And I'm pretty sure all of those clinics will accommodate our veterans. And just want to thank you for your work with our veterans, and please do reach out to me if you have any questions, because I would recommend, reaching out to the Gallup Satellite VA Clinic.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Johnson. I appreciate that. And I definitely will. I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Do we have any more questions from any members in the chamber? And online, I got Representative Roybal Caballero. Representative Roybal Caballero, are you there? You're unmuted, but we can't hear you. Yeah, we can see you, but we still can't hear you. I see your lips moving, and see you waving, still no. It's on her end. Try to mute and unmute again. Still no sound. Okay, go to the unmute button and to the down arrow. Switch audio on. Just switch the audio. Disconnect and reconnect. Because I show you're unmuted, but I don't hear any.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you, Representative, go ahead.
Thank you for that walkthrough. I was trying to remember to do that and I couldn't do it. So I just wanted to thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Manuelito, for your presentation. I'm honored to have you before us. You come from a very historically significant family amongst other families in our state. So thank you for stepping up. And I also wanted to, Madam Chair, check in and ask, and I'm not sure if it's been asked before, but whether you've worked with the Indian Affairs Department along with our state Veterans Affairs Department to help so that they can kind of help be the conduit to make sure that you're receiving everything that you identified in your aspirations, but also to address the challenges and concerns that you had. And I wanted to know if you had, whether it had been helpful or not helpful, and what we can do to help make that helpful to you.
Okay, thank you, Representative Butler. I just want to get your title wrong. Thank you for your comments. I do appreciate them. The new administration is the new Navajo Nation administration, I should say. It's a new administration. So what the director had to do and what they had to do was look over the policies and procedures, the plan of operations, update them, and get them streamlined with what the veterans are asking for today. And because the past ones were pretty outdated. So that took the most of last year and went through 2 directors to get to this point. So now, this going before you and the committee is very, very fortuitous, because now we're able to present these aspirations and challenges that we weren't able to bring forth before. So even though, you know, it was said before, it was mentioned, like the mobile unit, there was just no avenue of going toward, because there was always red tape, there was always too many barriers. But now, this is a huge accomplishment coming before the committee and actually giving you these challenges and these aspirations that we're looking at. It's a significant, to me, victory in our eyes, because now we actually can come before you and let you know, hey, this is what we want to move forward with. We want to be able to be more proactive with our veterans. And I say our New Mexico veterans because if you look at the Arizona veteran side, they already have so much stuff set up already for their veterans that they're about, 5 years ahead of us as far as care, as far as outreach. They have, and that's where I got some of the ideas from when we had a meeting with all of us at the Department of Health last year. And so now we're able to move forward and be able to present to you that we'll be able to work with those entities that you mentioned, the Indian Affairs and the Veteran Affairs here in New Mexico, to be able to start working toward making all of these a reality. So we're going to start working with it. I'm going to take this back to my organization and District 14 organization whom I worked closely with, and also with the administration to see how we can start opening those conversations, from government to government.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Manuelito. That really is very important so that the next time you have the opportunity to step before us, and we know how to evaluate what our role is going to be at that point. And just keep in mind that under this new, our new state governor administration, there is a very strong emphasis on interagency communication and interagency shared information and knowledge so that the agencies amongst themselves can, in a more cohesive and comprehensive manner, address all of our issues in our state. So I'd be interested in knowing in the future how well that fared for you, and then what we need to do, and just know that we're here to assist in whatever we can. Our veterans mean everything to us in the state. And we cannot thank our veterans enough on a daily and hourly basis for standing up, protecting, and upholding our constitutions for us. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Allison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for a very good presentation, Ms. Manuelito. You said that the Arizona veterans are 5 years ahead of you. Is it at the state level or is it the Navajo Nation level? The Navajo Nation, Arizona natives are being treated than New Mexico natives at the Navajo Nation level, or is it at the state levels?
Thank you for your question, Representative. That's a very good question. When we had this meeting with the federal VA administration, Arizona came in, and New Mexico, some of what was New Mexico came in as representatives. That's the first time I saw for myself that Arizona had more cohesive communication with the Navajo Nation administration. So the MOUs that Representative Johnson was talking about are mainly in Arizona, and the last time I knew was Crown Point was the only other one that had an MOU, and we're trying to work with Tohatchi to get one for our veterans in Tohatchi. So with the pandemic, really changed a lot of things, and how we can assist our veterans for bringing them in now to going to them. And so, yes, Arizona is, 5 years is about, an estimation, but I do know that they have representatives who are ready to do outreach. They have material, they have everything to be able to educate their veterans, and their local clinics are able to take them in and then refer them out, like she said, to bigger entities if need be. Whereas on the New Mexico side, we either have the VA administration, a hospital, or a GIMC, if anything else. So yeah, we're pretty behind the curve on a lot of that. And just because Arizona represents the majority of the Navajo Nation, we tend to be, overlooked. Yeah, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to catch up with what little time that we had. So it sounds like Representative Johnson and I have our work cut out for us in addition to Representative Pinto. So, but we will catch up. Aren't we, team? Okay, thank you, Ms. Manuelito.
Thank you, Representative Allison, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Representative. Any other questions? Those online, any questions? No. Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Manuelito. And we do have several organizations. There's the Tohatchi Veterans Organization, and then there's the Northern Navajo Veterans Organization that has the building in Shiprock. And one of the issues is having a certification that has to occur within an organization that is approved through the Navajo Nation when money is allocated in order for it to flow to the organization. And the barrier seemed to be, and I think the population, our Vietnam veteran population is probably the highest population. Am I correct, Lars?
Yes, Yes, you are, Senator.
So that population, they're kind of in that leadership role, but they are, with my own father, he turned 70 this year, and he retired back when he was 55. So doing something or following this process that the Navajo Nation's requiring our veterans to follow, especially if we have even after that, returning veterans that come back to our communities, to take on these roles is very seldom, and I appreciate that you took on this role. And I went to a veterans, our own New Mexico military veterans a committee meeting with the secretary was there, and I iterated to them that there needed to be some kind of assistance, even if it was monetary, to help assist in that role of helping them get those certification. Because I understand it's really time consuming. You have to have that business background that I don't think when some of our veterans return have it. They're trained for the military, am I correct? So that is a barrier that has to be overcome. And we appreciate all our veterans. And when we talk about referrals too, one of the code talkers mentioned to me that for 13 years he's been traveling to Albuquerque to receive services. And 13 years, someone had to drive, now they're having to be assisted to drive over there. And it's a bit, I don't know if you want to use the word disturbing, to not be able to stay within your area at that age. I mean, they're almost 100 years old. And to be on the road for 3 hours from Shiprock, that is not something I would really, it would bother me as a descendant. And I hope members of this committee consider, when stuff like this comes up, when we ask for funding or some extra resources, consider all the things that are entitled to it, because there is something with the 100-mile, I don't know if you are familiar, it's about something about 100 miles for reimbursement, or it has to be something with the hospital for 100 miles. Yeah, so if it's over 100 miles, they get a reimbursement. But Shiprock, easily from Gallup to Albuquerque is 130. But to spend 2 hours just to receive services from a specialist or in that manner, and it's a growing population for they chose to do it, but the serving does take its toll, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate that you were able to be here on such a short notice. That was one of the things that I don't know if there was any talk about a veteran cemetery, because we do have the one in Gallup, but now I'm getting requests from Church Rock and all these other little communities. I don't know if a survey could be taken, and I think this is more of a comment on exactly why would we want to create so many veteran cemeteries in that sense, so that we could, the focus would just be on the one, so we can upkeep it, and God forbid it fills up before our lifetime. But that's one thing, just a comment on that, about the requests we're getting to have some of those put up there. I don't know if you have any last thoughts or about anything I said.
Thank you, Senator Pinto. I do appreciate your comments and your veteran cemeteries has been brought up. However, there's at the local level, the chapter level, they have private land where they inter their loved ones on their land, and then they have the community cemetery. And I believe the community cemetery is right now mixed veteran and citizens. So they're wanting to put a veteran, if they can't have a private interment area on their land, then I believe they're starting to move toward that, and enforcing that, the land department, and having them move toward utilizing community rather than setting aside land somewhere on or land for their interment. So they have to go through certain steps to make that a possibility, and because the land department is so overwhelmed with other issues, that the cemetery issue gets overlooked a lot. So I think that's why they want to bring up the veteran cemetery, so they can just put their veterans with the community cemetery, but give them the honor of being separate and maybe better, care for them or what they have. But that's almost of a discussion that's hardly ever made at the local level. And when they do talk about it, it just gets into the private land and the community land before it gets to veterans. So, but I can bring that up with the administration and with my organization. I can ask them that and then start from there, surveying them and seeing what their input is. And just to let you know, for my organization, this is a new concept. They've, like Senator Pinto said, Vietnam veterans, World War II veterans. Unfortunately, we lost our last World War II, Johnny Walletto, not too long ago, and our Vietnam veterans are hanging in there. And I believe that's who I took over from as a Vietnam veteran. So it was hard for him to let go of his seat and let a woman veteran and, a younger one at that, take over all the hard work that they had started. So I fully intend to start with the organization and bringing more information and, going through information in detail so that they understand what we're trying to do, what the committee's trying to do for them, for the state, and start rebuilding that morale, that esprit de corps, the camaraderie that they once had, that the New Mexico state does care about them. The Navajo Nation does care about what happens to New Mexico veterans. And once they see movement like this, when I take this back to them, they're probably going to be like, wow, you talked to the committee, so I tried to explain that to the former commander, and he kind of was like, what do you mean? So, but that's where we're going to be at, and that's what I fully intend to be with, transparent with my organization. And if I can, to the rest of the District 14 organizations, and then with the administration, and possibly with the Fort Defiance Agency and the Eastern Agency, so that they can start working with our representatives and our senators to start making these a reality and the proper channels that we need to go through. So yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you. And I guess, when we're talking about that too, if you're not familiar where Fort Defiance is, it is in Arizona. So part of the Eastern Agency kind of goes over the Arizona border. So the monies that are allocated, if it's going to that particular agency, goes into Fort Defiance. And it has to be released from there, kind of like crossing state lines and coming back. And I've had some veterans in the past that were in leadership tell me that they did have money that was appropriated from the state to the veterans organizations that they never received, that it was stuck or got lost in the Fort Defiance Agency books. So this is, when we go move forward, I don't know how we can create in such a manner that it does stay in New Mexico. And I think with COVID-19, that also brought in light to some of the monies that New Mexico put forth, not really staying with our New Mexico constituents. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time and you coming all the way out here to be in person, and our members here for attending today in the chamber and online. I hope you guys have a great weekend. I don't know if there's any final comments or questions. Oh, do we have public comment? We don't see anyone on there. And the next meeting's October 16th, that's a Friday. And I believe that's our second to the last meeting. And our last meeting will be November 13th, the last meeting. And the last two agendas, I believe, are very full. So it'll be an interesting last two meetings. I appreciate everything and thank you very much. Any questions or? Okay, thank you. And we are adjourned for today. And you guys have safe travels and stay healthy.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Back home. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam. Oh.
We're having a veterans meeting here in October. So I would love for you to do a presentation.
Okay.
Here's my card. Do you have a number I can reach? Don't listen to her. That lady right there, don't listen to her.
Oh, yes, definitely.
I tried to call out, but I need to hear from, I don't know if you guys are having meetings or virtual.
We're having in-person meetings, but we have social distancing and stuff like that. So this time,
I have my info, my contact info.
yeah, yeah, I still do.
Keep me in the loop.
I will definitely
Email
because,
me, text me, call me.
okay. Oh, yeah, now that, I'm in this position, I have more, more, okay, here we are.